So we have 8 people here. Awesome, everyone say hi. And then here I am.
Oh, sorry. Alright, thanks guys for coming. For my persuasive speech, I decided to do it on as to why refugees should become welcomed into the United States. I feel like this is a hot topic because of the previous election and a lot of arguments that were raised over building a wall and stricter border policies and things like that, but I personally feel that refugees should continually be allowed into America. First of all, I'd like to start by saying refugees will offer economic growth in ways of offering new insights and productivity into the workforce, and because of this should be allowed to enter America. Refugees are defined, the definition of a refugee is a person who has been forced to leave their country in order to escape war, persecution, or natural disaster. And according to Stephanie Nebehay, there are an estimated 60 million refugees in the world today. That means 1 in every 122 people is a refugee, and more than half of that number are children. Economists agree that refugees will be able to help America thrive and allow more women into the workforce. And refugees are not able to collect things such as Social Security or welfare because they're not an American citizen, so they will not bring any sort of financial debt into America. And refugees are in desperate need of better working conditions and better opportunities because of the poor places in which they live. And if the opportunity were available to them to come to America, they would help this country and its economy thrive in many ways. So I'd like to begin with a personal story. So I served my mission in Italy, and while there, I met refugees often. Often they were on the streets begging for money to just have something to eat, have a warm place to stay, and it was heartbreaking to just walk by and see these very helpless people who couldn't do much. I remember meeting a guy who said that his plan in Italy was to continue to stay in Italy, make money, send it back to his parents and his family until they had enough money to come to Italy because conditions were that bad in his home country. And they were from just poverty-stricken places in Africa, and they just had nothing. And I remember hearing their story of coming to Italy. They were on pretty much a raft with a small bag. It's pretty much, just a plastic grocery bag of things that they could carry with them. And they just came here, and they are just so desperate to find a better way of life for themselves and their families somewhere else. So Kevin R. Johnson, the dean of the University of California School of Law of Davis, tells times when he has seen refugees, he tells that several refugees come with only a small bag of items, like the people that I met in Italy, on a crowded raft. Johnson says that these refugees have endured the worst of the worst conditions, poverty-stricken areas, a bad raft, things like that, and so that should be a good representation as to why they are so ready to work. Johnson knows of their desperation, and he is aware of the things that they are escaping, such as gang violence, poverty, and evil and harsh governments that these people are trying to escape. Allowing refugees in our country could only promote economic growth, but also more peace between countries in the United States in which we currently live. A lot of people would see America as a place of refugees and people who are in search of a better life, as a place where they can find that, so it must be a great place to live, and they're going to continue to think highly of America, which would promote peace throughout the world. And then Johnson recalls how there are several issues between the United States and various countries throughout the world, and as America lets more refugees in, they'll just see it as a place that's just much better for them to live. And then Brian Kaplan, a professor of economics at George Mason University, tells how there will be some adjustments in the workforce as more refugees are welcomed to it. However, this case is similar to when African Americans and women were welcomed into the workforce. Things were awkward and weird and uncomfortable for some people as more and more people were coming into the workforce. But after those adjustments were made, things were thriving. The economy was thriving, products were thriving, just productivity, just everything was thriving in so many ways because of the fresh minds and then more people who were willing to work. And also I read from Eduardo Porter, an economist and journalist for the New York Times, that work is not always available to them in the third world countries that they live in. Places like Haiti and Syria and different parts of Africa, work is just scarce and it's just hard to find because it's just that of an underdeveloped third world country. And he says that a refugee comes willing to work and do anything, meaning they could flip burgers at McDonald's. And he says just flipping burgers at McDonald's, they would be making 15.5 times more what they make in their home country. He also says that from the year of 1990 to 1910, net benefits and profits were able to rise from $15 billion a year because of immigrants and refugees coming in. And then John Keenan, a chairman for the Department of Economics at the University of Wisconsin, says the gains that would be lost from removing immigration from the workplace are massive, in the trillions of dollars. And he thinks that not having refugees and immigrants in the workforce is much costlier than not having them. Kaplan, and then one of my favorite things that he said in his article was, a mind, regardless of if that mind is a man, woman, African American, or Haitian, is a terrible thing to waste. Basically, he's just trying to point out that people everywhere have something to offer. It doesn't matter if you are from Haiti or from Syria or from Africa or wherever everybody is, they are special and they do have something to offer the workforce. And then lastly, I'd like to bring up what the first presidency has taught us about helping the refugees. So it's that the first presidency has taught us to love our neighbor and that we are children of God, inasmuch as you have done it unto the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me. The first presidency has said it is our duty to our fellow men to help in any way we can and to help the refugees. And then Elder Patrick Kieran, in a general conference talked about how when members of the church themselves were refugees. He says, as members of the church, we don't have to look back far in our history to reflect on times when we were refugees, violently driven from our homes and farms to start all over again. We can ask ourselves, what if their story were my story? Their story is our story not that many years ago. He goes on to say, the Savior knows how it feels to be a refugee. He was one. As a young child, Jesus and his family fled to Egypt to escape murderous swords of Herod. At various points in his ministry, Jesus found himself and his life in danger, ultimately submitting to the designs of evil men who had plotted his death. Perhaps then, it is all the more remarkable to us that he repeatedly taught us to love one another and to us as he loves, to love our neighbor as ourselves. And then as we hear the story of refugees and the ancestors of the church, we find similarities to them in the Savior. And as we look further, we can understand that there is much that needs to be done to help the refugees. And as we hear that our ancestors went through it and that everybody is a child of God and they're going through it and that the Savior went through it, it becomes our Christian duty to be for open borders, helping these refugees and helping them in any way we can. So to sum everything up, I'd just like to say immigrants are in fact willing to enter the workforce and do whatever they can to make a better life for themselves and their families. It is also our Christian duty and it's Christ-like to help these refugees. Refugees would make great gain and offer much to the workforce, and allowing refugees in the country would make America a much better place and the world a more peaceful place. And lastly, refugees just offer so much growth that it is just the better idea to continually allow them into our country.